Member for Burnaby-Lougheed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to take my place in the debate for the second reading of the government's Bill 34, the Red Tape Reduction Day Act. Members of this assembly on both sides of the House spent our first week back in session taking our time to wholeheartedly celebrate the many contributions of small businesses in our province, with October, of course, being the Small Business Month and October 18th to 24th being the Small Business Week. So it was my pleasure to make a private member statement in support of our small businesses on the first day of fall session this past Monday. On behalf of the official opposition, I joined the minister in welcoming to the legislature a very special group of BC's entrepreneurs that we had and their advocates earlier today for the launch of the Small Business Month. Now, I'm very happy to support any initiative that recognizes and supports our small business community. They are the employers for over 1 million British Columbians, providing more than half of all private sector jobs, and contributing nearly a third of our provincial GDP with $14.4 billion worth of merchandise shipped to international destinations that account for almost half of the total value of goods exported from our province. But when one speaks of recognitions and support, as well intended as the ceremonial sentiment that's expressed in this act claims to be, I can't help but notice the irony of it. A day for the government to essentially remind itself by law its commitment for cutting red tapes. That's what this bill is. But the problem is that not only is it not specified anywhere in this whole one-sentence long bill that this is meant for the small business. I mean, my colleagues on this side of the House have already raised multitudes of concerns with the generality of the language and therefore the corresponding ambiguity that comes with the bill. And they have legitimate reasons for their skepticism, considering the devastating track record of this government under string of deregulations of addictions and recovery homes, child death reviews, forestry worker deaths, farm worker safety, rail safety and derailments, and of course to the tune of the latest tragedy at Mount Poly. So let's take all of that aside and consider that this bill is for the small businesses, even though the bill doesn't specifically read so. It's still strange. It's just strange, as one would think that all members here strive to, without having to be held accountable by our legislation to do so, to serve our small business community with our level best. I don't think we need a legislation to do the obvious that we're called in this House to do. So if this is a trend that the government is setting, Honorable Speaker, I don't want to imagine how many more days we'll be debating in this chamber on taxpayers' dime for all sorts of other bills that this government will apparently need to remind itself to do the obvious job. So I would argue that what our hardworking entrepreneurs really need from this government is policies and resources of substance that go beyond just another repetition of hyperpartisan rhetoric embodied in a ceremonial bill such as this for nothing more than what it really feels like a round of self-congratulations by the government. So now 81% of all of our small businesses in this province, that's 310,000 some, are micro businesses with fewer than five paid employees, and 53% of these have no paid help at all. It's a one-man operation for a lot of our small businesses in BC. And such micro business and self-employed setups are often the case for many immigrant families throughout the province, owner-operated, run by a couple or partners, with occasional help from their immediate family. So these are 310,000 micro businesses and owner-operated businesses with high turnover rate, and many struggle with a gross lack of representation to voice what really hindered their success. And Honorable Speaker, it's not the minimum wage or the benefits from employees when over 50% of all businesses in BC don't have any employees to begin with. And of course, sweeping away the outdated, cumbersome, and irrelevant regulations would be welcome news, and my colleagues and I on this side of the House fully support that. But I'm not sure since when the red tape reduction became such a trophy-worthy initiative, as one would think that it's only natural standard for any regulatory body to continue to strive towards better policies and leaner regulatory processes. So another thing that I do have to mention is that the government certainly seems to pick and choose what they want to see and do, because from the consultations upon consultations that they claim to have done, the only thing they come back to us to debate in the House this session, something so sorely called out by the small business owners of our province, is this bill. I mean, are they serious? I mean, our entrepreneurs are crying out for a legislated red tape reduction day, and that'll make all the difference for their business? I don't think so. I'm not sure who this government is talking to, because what really hurts the small businesses is not the fact that we didn't have a ceremonial day designated for red tape reduction. What hurts them is the skyrocketing cost of operation, like the latest hydro that's hiking 28%, making running their machineries and their facilities that much more expensive. A pet store in my community, a local small business, will be paying $4,000 more this year just on that extra electricity bill alone. The small business owners I talk to are telling me how they're feeling underserved by this government's current Commercial Tenancy Act, articulated in very complex languages, and of course, mainly in the landlord's interest. They voiced their opinions in this precinct this spring about the fine prints of long franchise contracts in favor of the franchisor. They've talked about the rates of rent and triple net for their operations, quite literally forcing even the successful businesses to close their doors and be bullied out of their locations. And why is this government not ringing any alarm bells on the diluted consumer protections for all the bank fees undisclosed or poorly disclosed? An average of 3% charge seems to be the regular standard for every credit card transaction, and what that means for a bustling little family-run bakery in my community whose gross revenue is about $800,000 before expenses is paying as much as $24,000 just in credit card levy. That could hire a whole full-time staff to add to their operation, but that's not the case, but nobody's saying anything about that in the House. Now, it would have been just wonderful for me to be able to rise in the House today to support the government's bill on how about a day to recognize, a day dedicated for the importance of adult basic education and English language training for our small business community, is in a province where over a quarter of our residents are immigrants and we welcome another 42,000 every year. One would think that accessible ABE and ELL programs are government's responsibility to raise not just skilled workforce that our small business communities desperately need, but our entrepreneurs also, and especially the ones with language barrier and those with foreign credentials that are not recognized here. And this government knows that they created more red tape nightmares than any red tape they claim to have cut, like the mess that was the PST to the HSD back to PSC transition. That took forever, for years, and the taxpayers are still on the hook for that. The private bureaucracy of multi-material BC, and I have to mention it again, even the food safety inspection that remains inadequately acquainted with the various food preparation process in ethnic cuisine in a province that's as diverse as ours. I had one small restaurant in my community who complained of the fact that how inadequately trained these inspectors were, that when they came and they had over 50 pounds of red beans that were perfectly fermented and ready to go for their restaurant, but they had wax poured all over it in the name of the fact that they simply weren't familiar with the procedure. And these are the stories that I'm hearing at the doorstep, Honorable Speaker. So many of our entrepreneurs make less than the minimum wage by the hour. The so-called underinsured working poor with just enough income to be disqualified for exemptions or subsidies are crippled by this government's relentless increase to user fees, like MSP that doubled, another 6% hike for ICBC, all the while facing the same unaffordability challenges in housing, daycare, transportation, and tuition, like the rest of us who are employed but have often benefits that come with our jobs that our entrepreneurs are without. So despite this bill by the government to give itself another pat on the back, the reality is that tomorrow, for the 310,000 of our micro businesses and owner-operators, their disadvantage has not changed. It'll be the same challenges with or without this bill. They'll be disadvantaged in understanding the laws and their rights for effective negotiations and fair protection. Many of these small business owners are challenged to claim, let alone be aware of what resources may be available. They seldom have the luxury of the time or the funds to be able to participate in public consultations. They don't have the time and the availability to, of course, hire specialists and lobbyists, find support and get training, or take out memberships at various advocacy bodies. So now all these are not what I Googled online, Honorable Speaker. It's not stats that I pulled up from Stats Canada necessarily. I'm not sure where and who and when the government consulted for feedback from the small business community, but I mean, to think there's, of course, more than 380,000 of them to begin with, and I'm certainly not claiming that I've talked to every one of them either, but I know that those who are struggling the most are the ones that are also least likely heard, as these are the entrepreneurs that are working 12-hour days every day at their businesses, and they wouldn't be at the public consultations. They wouldn't have the lobbyists. They wouldn't have memberships at various advocacy bodies. So I didn't put on some event and blasted some invite on social media. I actually physically went to them and I showed up at their door. So this summer I visited over a dozen communities by car. I parked on one side of the street and I literally walked into every shop on the right side and circled my way back, stopping by every shop on the left side. And the reason that I did that is because the people that are the busiest to talk to us, to let us know what really hurt them, are not available to talk to us and join us at these small roundtables, public hearings, at the forums. It was my absolute pleasure to connect with over 200 entrepreneurs right in their businesses, be it at the quaint downtown stretch of Penticton or the main road through Lillooet, from an older Korean couple taking over a bed and breakfast business to a young college graduate starting a new organic tea line. And these are the stories that they shared with me directly as they poured coffee for their customers as they checked the inventory of their stocks. And so you know what, Honorable Speaker? Guess what? Not a single one out of the 200 entrepreneurs that I visited this summer, not a single one of them asked for a legislated day for a red tape reduction. Small business owners are some of the hardest working people in our province, and that's especially true for those in micro business or owner-operated businesses. As we know, many of them work long hours, and they look after all aspects of their business, whether it's advertising to accounting, with minimal resources and often lacking expertise. Now, I know that there are many members across the floor that I know deeply care for the well-being of their constituents that they were elected to represent. So I challenge the government, with all due respect, take a break from the photo ops. And I look forward to rising in the House in the near future, to support bills that will make tangible differences for the least heard and the most struggling entrepreneurs of BC, who are just few empowering policy improvements and accessible resources away from sustainable success that they deserve and our community and people can benefit from. So thank you.